You have the ring. And I see your Schwartz is as big as mine. Now let's see how well you handle it.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's time to talk about the very best comic books of the week. Normally we would have Drew from Comics Elite, but Comics Elite are off on the road in C2, E2 in Chicago, so I brought in a ringer, my good friend Perch. You're in the middle of the move. I'm so glad you made some time for me today.
Well, thanks for having me on, and absolutely, I'm always happy to help you out. And I'm going to be nowhere at the quality level of what you've been doing there with Drew, but happy to pitch in on an off week.
Absolutely, Drew. He reads pretty much every single comic that's released, so he brings in some doozies here on me. But this is a pretty damn good comic book week. Surprisingly for DC, I thought they had some really strong titles, but Marvel had some good stuff too. We'll hit the indie scene first. So we like to do that first. This was like my favorite comic book of the week, surprisingly, despite how good Marvel and DC were. It's called The Crimson Cage from AWA Studios. This is written by John Lees, art by Alex Cormack. It's so weird. You know, when I read the description of what the comic book was, it was like old school, like wrestling, but with demons. Like, okay, this sounds like it's in my wheelhouse, but it's like these old territory wrestlers in the South. And he's got a match. He ends up like going into a swamp, and apparently he's predestined to be the next world champion. And the guy he's with, his sons are going to be like this big legacy of wrestling champions. And then so the story is predetermined, but it's taking place in the ring. So it's almost like double meta. You know what I'm saying, Perch?
Yeah. No, I think comics that could properly kind of capture that wrestling feel, both the in the ring and out of the ring, and be able to bring that in one place. It's a lot of magical ground to cover. So I'm kicking myself now. I haven't gone through AWA this week, but I'm very intrigued. I've got to get to this one.
Oh yeah, you're gonna love it. Like there's the voiceover announcers. It's you don't see them, but they've got the perfect cadence and the descriptors that you would see like in old school like 1970s 80s wrestling. Like, we're sorry, folks, we didn't know it was gonna break down like this. And the major champ comes in, and obviously it's like a Ric Flair knockoff with the Four Horsemen. And I don't want to give all the details, but if you like weird horror stories and you love wrestling, this is literally the best comic book you're going to read. I was shocked at how much I liked it. I knew it was going to be in my wheelhouse, but I didn't know I was going to like it quite as much as I did. It is indie art, but it absolutely fits the flavor and style of the comic book as well.
It sounds like a lot of fun. So you sold me on this for sure, and I'll definitely check that out. I think AWA's been doing a lot of good stuff. They've been under the radar, but they've got a really good collection of people and talent over there.
Absolutely. They also have one of the few shared superhero universes outside of Marvel and DC that they're kind of building up right now. So definitely one of the publishers to keep an eye on. I know you've got something that you've been enjoying. I know you've talked about it on your channel quite a bit from Image Comics. You're still reading the Post Americana?
It did. Yeah, I like that story. It's by Steve Skoroshin. It wrapped up this week. So this is issue 7, which concluded the series. Kind of an odd, I'm still old school, so I'm not used to things being 7 issues. It just seems like a weird number to me. But it was intended as a full story. I think the series got off on a weird foot because a lot of people pegged it as some kind of Trump analogy. Because I think the first issue landed right on or around this January 6th situation that everybody just couldn't stop talking about. But that's not what this comic book ever was. The point was it was Mad Max in America in the future, and really that simple. It's crazy. It's over the top. It wears its ludicrousness on its sleeve, which is, I think, if you're going to do this kind of book, don't try and make it too smart or too, don't try and have a hidden moral in there. Just allow yourself to go all in with the craziness of this story. And it's fun. It's extremely violent. It's crazy stuff. I mean, one of the plot points in this book is that the robotic characters, like the Disneyland type characters, the characters, the automatronic characters have gained some level of robotic sentience and are running around murdering people. I mean, it's a crazy book, and from start to finish, but it gives you a complete story with an end. It doesn't leave the door open. It just, you get the full thing. And it was a lot of fun to read.
Well, you used the Mad Max analogy, but what I'm hearing is this is like old school doctor, or not doctor, but Judge Dredd from 2000 AD
Yeah.
when it was in the anthology, and they had all these weird stuff. And next thing you know, like the Jolly Green Giants in the comic book, you're like, where did this come from?
Yeah, I think that's right. If you remember those old Judge Dredd comics, some Mad Max flavor and everything else, it's just absurd. It's escapism. It's not every comic book needs to be Watchmen or have a hidden message, which is why I'm interested to see his Crimson Cage book as well. It sounds like a similar kind of fun book. This book was just fun. Very, very violent, but fun.
Yeah, I remember reading it early on, and I was like, this is, there's no holding back on the violence on this one.
No.
Like, he was going for it.
No, and it's not, there's no aspect of this comic that is, that quote unquote political. This is, it's just ludicrous fun, over the top fun. And it's a good series, nicely drawn, start to finish. I enjoyed it a lot.
You know, I read a lot of other indie comic books, but really those are the ones that stood out this week. So we'll head on over to Marvel, which had a surprisingly really good week. You know, obviously they had some of the big titles coming out. Me personally, I thought Hellions 18 just ended perfectly. I think Zeb Wells, Steven Segovia just really brought it home. There's a really awesome moment between Orphan and Nanny and Orphan Maker. Doc and I obviously talk about it more in depth after this. We have This Week at X-Men, but I thought it was just a great ending. I love this series. I hate that it's ending at 18 issues, but I would also hate for it to extend out and have to become something else in this next era of X-Men. So if you could only give me 18 issues, but they're 18 great issues, I will take it every time in this comic book industry.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It was a fun ride while it lasted. I think it did tee up some stuff in the future, both with the Goblin Queen and other characters that are going to come into play down the road in some form or fashion. I wouldn't be surprised if this title is revisited as limited series, or, you know, I mean, they only have 9 comics, Wes, coming out. So surely there's room for 5 or 6 more. Yeah. But good stuff. I enjoyed it. My one, I would say, regret, but back when Marvel did Incoming many, many months ago now, there was one page of Mr. Sinister kind of evilly plotting, you know, mixing with the DNA characters. And
happens in here too.
It does. It's pretty much the same scene. And the challenge I have is that 18 issues later to be still at that same place. It's not a fault of this title, but I just wish Marvel would get moving on some of this stuff.
Yeah, a lot of it has seemed to be kind of stuck in the mud or kind of in one place. Speaking of that, there was another really good comic book. I did a review with Doc that came out yesterday. We loved the book, and I know you loved it because it's the one you're talking about. Inferno 3, there's so many good concepts. It's like all the stuff that we really wanted from Jonathan Hickman. Yeah,
it's a good book. I think, you know, for me, it was a toss-up between certainly, I think Devil's Reign was an interesting book. Inferno #3 was a good book. I do want to throw out there, Amazing Fantasy #5 was also a hell of a fun ride. That entire thing has been a fun ride. But Inferno is, the challenge you have with this is when you're reading this book, you're getting some great moments of Doug Ramsey with Karima, and you look at this and go, why in the hell were these scenes not shown a year ago when Hickman was doing the ongoing X-Men title? It would have fit so perfectly there. If you kind of mix and match this and look at it like the way Claremont would sometimes take a scene and then 2 years later revisit that scene as a subplot in his ongoing title, that was very effective storytelling. Here it looks like Hickman had the same idea, except rather than putting in the ongoing series, they basically cram it in and make an event book out of it. And so it takes away some of what should have been incredible, because there were some moments in that book.
Absolutely. Some of the reveals, especially with the Omega Sentinel, didn't exactly see that one coming. I was like, how does this work? There's clearly something deeper, you know, beneath the surface that we haven't been revealed here. Hopefully by the end of this, we get it, you know, in the final issue. But yeah, I'm with you. That was Doc and I were like, we love all this stuff, but why is it here? We should have already read this already.
Well, and you start to get a really uncomfortable feeling, like with one issue left of this, how are they planning to wrap it up? And you just, you know, you're not going to get a full quote unquote event or story. This Inferno series really are a bunch of small reveals that should have been sprinkled out amongst the main title, but Hickman leaving the X-Men meant that couldn't happen. And so it's like they took several of his just subplot plot points, put it into one 4-issue series, and out it comes. So it feels like an incomplete story in the end. Some great moments, but it does really make you frustrated about where everything landed.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Devil's Raid. I don't mind mentioning that one again. I did the full review on it. When there's action in this thing and the characters are being heroes, it's absolutely great. I just the like how we got here, it's kind of like I don't know.
I agree.
It feels like a letdown, but once they're in there, it's so much fun, especially the Luke Cage stuff. That would have me going.
It was great to see Luke Cage actually get some moments on his 50th anniversary. I mean, they canceled his comic, so at least he's getting some love here. But I am with you. This is a story. The problem with this is Zdarsky is telling a story very well, but it's a story we've seen. In fact, multiple times. But we have seen this exact story as well. You might as well call this Civil War II, except we had one of those
or Daredevil Fear State.
Yeah, it's the going back to this kind of evil government agency imposing restrictions. Now, granted, I know a lot of people who work in comics are against the vaccine mandates and all these other things. They're very bothered by it. They want more freedom, and so that the expression is coming out in these comic books. But enough is enough already. Do I need to say I was sarcastic, or do you think people would get that?
I think they got it. I could hear it.
All right, I hope so.
Now, as far as DC, like I said, Marvel, that's one of the better Marvel weeks that we've had in a while. Over at DC, most of the books that I like this week were centered on Batman. Obviously, I talk about a lot of these in This Week in Batman, but it is worth mentioning again, really, if you have not been reading Arkham City, The Order of the World from Dan Waters and Danny, we got the 3rd issue this week. I do think it's probably the weakest of the 3, but it's still really good. It's such a weird book set in Gotham, but there is no Batman. And you got this the psychologist kind of with the 10-eyed man tracking down these escaped convicts from Arkham. It's such a moody book. It's so weird.
It is very noir feel. Has definitely a Frank Miller type look and feel to it. It's a good book. It has its own place in DC. And I'm with you. This issue is probably the weakest of the bunch, but as a series, it's quite strong. Yeah,
they had some pretty interesting reveals. And when Azrael's on the page, he definitely pops up because the artist is doing a great job there. Now, of note, we have a new Batman writer. Not sure how long Williamson's going to be there, but I know you said you were impressed with Batman 118.
I was. I like what Williamson. I like at least the first issue. It's a little hard to tell because this is the issue where we're like getting ready for the next part of the plot, which is a little exhausting to me to, once again have to go through this. It feels like we go through this every year or so with Batman, but it was told well. I think the general moments, it was nice to see Batman getting to do something that wasn't a giant overarching government plot or Joker doing something again. He just got to fight crime, and I appreciate that.
Do an investigation, detective work.
I know it's crazy. He was actually doing what he's supposed to do. And I like the way they're introducing Batman Inc. and where they're sending him off. So I thought it was a good first step for Williamson. Art was wonderful. Hopefully it maintains this quality and we just can get some non-event Batman stories for a while. I know that that's not happening, but that would be what I'd like.
Yeah, I liked. I think with the position Williamson was in, I think he couldn't have done it any better. He was able to transition, pivot from the James Tynion story in the End of Fear State and into this, Batman Incorporated mystery that he's got him off. Obviously leaving Gotham for a while. Yeah, great. I'm ready for the rest of the adventure. So I think it was very effective, and I'm excited to see what Williamson does with the character.
No, I am too, and I think there's some stuff that's starting to have some benefit here. I think Williamson, if he's given some time, we can see something good coming out of the character. I know this is a title that a lot of your audience and my audience is not that fond of. They were disappointed with where it went. But there were some moments as well in Green Lantern that are finally starting to kind of bear fruit of some of these bigger mythology things. And maybe it's just, old comic reader me. I'd love to get Eric Breen's take on it. But seeing some of the new gods and some of the elements that, particularly for Jon Stewart, what a lot of people might forget is that some of this power and this I don't want to spoil anything, but the evolved nature of the character was introduced like 30 years ago and was part of that whole mosaic thing that DC just forgot. They completely ignored for 30 years. So the fact that it's coming up back here again, I really always appreciate when a writer reminds us that they actually have read comics in the past. It's great. I like that we finally saw, Joe have some weakness, which was nice to see as well. So put her on her heels, which has been a struggle for DC. But this title still, I think, bears the unfortunate brunt of not false advertising exactly, but the way it was pitched was
I feel like I've been bait and switched, Perch. I'm going to be honest.
It does feel that way, and I don't think that's, having had enough conversations with the writer. That was not the writer's intent. I think if I could speak openly, I think he's as frustrated as anyone about the way this book was marketed and put out. I think he had a story in mind. He's telling that story. And I think what we were sold from marketing was something completely different. And so I think having to reconcile those two things together is pretty tough, which is, again, a shame, because there are some stuff going on in this series that I think is pretty interesting.
Now, there is another series we should talk about. Tom Taylor, newly announced DC Comics exclusive. He's got a Elseworld story, Dark Knights of Steel. This is really my wheelhouse. You're talking about the DC universe in a fantasy type of situation, kind of like Game of Thrones type stuff. I still enjoyed this one. I don't get why they haven't changed up the dialogue, why they're speaking as if they're in Gotham rather than this other universe, where you would imagine the syntax would be a little bit different. I don't know. I'm still digging it, because this is the kind of stuff that's in my wheelhouse. I wish they didn't call him Batman. Why isn't he like the Knight of Bats or something?
Yeah, I liked the first issue. I thought it came out the gate strong. The second issue went backwards for me quite a bit. I mean, it's still kind of like I said, I enjoy it. I also have the same feeling of, this is an interesting wheelhouse to explore. I like the medieval tie. I think the artist is doing a really great job of bringing some very different visuals to the table. It's just that this book felt far less special than the first one. It felt already like we're retreading a bunch of things that we've seen before. This one felt a lot more like your typical Elseworld story that has been told a number of times. I saw some of Taylor's kind of standard tropes that he often brings in, rear their head here. And I'm with you on the dialogue. It's very annoying to be set in this and again, the artist is doing hero's work here of really lush, really rich environments. And then the dialogue is tonally just very off. It takes you out of it. Yeah.
So I love the concept. The first issue, I was definitely sold on this. The second one, I say stick with it a little bit longer, but some chinks in the armor, but obviously we got Tom Taylor, who's going to be kind of the man over at DC Comics as far as writers go.
Yeah, he's it's his world to play in right now. I think Josh Williamson and Tom Taylor are going to be the architects for 2022, with hopefully a nice curveball from Sean Murphy once his White Knight series gets out there. But I mean, look what Tom Taylor's accomplished in like 60 days. He's got both the son of Superman and the cousin of Superman, both bisexual.
Absolutely. But it makes more sense in the Dark Knights of Steel, because it actually plays into like a plot element that's happening.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. I'm saying it tongue in cheek for sure.
Absolutely. So that is the best comics of the week. We got some good indie comics. The Crimson Cage from AWA. Post Americana wraps up, and Pert says you need to go check that out. I imagine it'll be in trades in the not too distant future. That's from Image Comics. Marvel had a nice week. We got the end of Hellions. We got, we're getting towards the end of Inferno. Devil's Reign has a really strong start. Love the artist, love the writer. I think that's going to work out fine. DC, it was kind of a Batman week. Arkham City, Batman, Dark Knight of Steel, but you also appreciated Green Lantern.
I did. And I know a lot of people push back on that in the comments, and I do totally understand the bait and switch. I just, it's a shame, because we complain so much, a lot of us, including the people I know who are listening to this, reading those comments now. We want our comic writers to tap into the history and bring those things forward. And he's doing that. And so I look at that and go, where was the marketing person who was supposed to help this book get off on the right foot? And so and again, shout out to Kari Andrews, Amazing Fantasy wrapping up. That was a nice, beautiful book as well.